Hi, welcome back to the Vanderbilt Political Review podcast. Today, I had a special guest on, my colleague in the College Democrats, the president of that organization, Kyung. If you listened to the last podcast, you would have known that I also, besides my role in doing this, am the president of the College Republicans, so he's my colleague in that respect. But we talked about so many topics. We got down so many rabbit holes relating to the election back in November and our thoughts about that. And then everything that has come from that point to now, as a time of recording, which is the middle of March 2025. Of course, a million things to talk about, which is why this episode's extra long. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it in 2 parts yet, but by the time this is out, you'll see that. But anyway, without further ado, my conversation with Kyung. Yeah, so, of course, you're the VCD president.
That's right.
I'm the VCR president, Vanderbilt College Democrats and Republicans, respectively.
And we're both in VPR, so that's where
exactly
the common ground
it
is.
It speaks volumes what VPR is. But, of course, the biggest political events and changes that we've seen all precipitated from the election on November, was it 4th or 5th, whenever it was.
That's right.
And we had a debate, the two of us, the night before the election.
Yeah.
I guess, Andrew, just walk through how you felt between the end of that debate and then the election night actually happening. That 24 hours, what was going through your head? Were you hopeful for the then vice president?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this was like an extraordinary election. And like, I mean, hopefully it's not too out of date that we're talking about it now. And everybody has their own diagnosis of what went wrong for the Democrats during this. But yeah, I mean, I can't say that I was feeling supremely confident going into it. I think, you know, it would have been very difficult for any Democratic candidate to have won this election. Right. And I think pretty much everybody agrees about that at this point. I mean, but even the candidate herself, you know, not like I was like over the moon about, you know, Kamala Harris, to be quite honest. I thought she was, you know, somewhat lacking in some areas. I think like she kind of started making her own situation worse when she started dodging interviews. And, you know, more recently, I mean, CBS, I think, just released a full uncut interview because the FCC demanded it. And I mean, yeah, it gave off an air of wanting to hide something or wanting to cover up something, you know, some deficits maybe. Yeah. And I thought that was a mistake. I mean, it was at least in comparison to Trump, who seemed to be very confident in going on all sorts of platforms, and you know, everyone talks about the podcast. Yeah. But even just like going to like that event with the National Association of like Black Journalists or something, like that was it was a lot of public events that he did where he kind of opened himself up for attack, and even if he didn't handle it well, in my opinion, like it still shows something about his willingness to go in front of people and take that sort of criticism, maybe not constructively, but still be there.
Yeah. No, I have to agree with you. I think a lot of this did come down to, I think it was the same problem that Joe Biden had, but just in a different form, I think, with Kamala Harris. So just how you can talk about policies all day long, but for so many voters, it is a little bit of policy. You know, there has to be some substance there. It can't be all hot air. Right. But a lot of it's just, for lack of a better term, the vibe. And I think we all could agree that the vibe, especially after the June debate, wasn't there with Joe Biden at all.
Can't say it was.
But with Vice President Harris, it was a similar thing too. She was seen as very, and I feel bad. I feel like I'm just kind of like throwing I guess you know, more grief at that already grievous situation for you. But no, I think that's certainly the case. I think that was a big part of it too. Yeah. But I guess I'll ask you another question here. Like, I've also heard the idea that the only reason why Trump won was because of certain, well, really 2 things: because of the immigration situation, or at least how people perceive that, and because of the economy, inflation, egg prices, right? Yeah. Do you think that, let's say, President Biden got the immigration thing under control more soon, or at least if he got it under control in a way that seemed to counter Trump's attacks of him, and if he somehow got the economy more under control, inflation more under control, do you think that either him, if he survived the little mutiny that happened, or Vice President Harris would have prevailed, or at least had a better showing.
Well, okay, let me get this right. You're asking if
sorry, it's kind of a lot he's put on the table.
You're asking if I think that those were the two issues that were the most.
I guess
pertinent,
that's the hidden premise there too.
Okay.
So I suppose answer the hidden premise, and then do you think that would have had an effect?
Right. I mean, I don't mean to like. Hopefully, I'm not just reiterating stuff that we said during our debate, because our issues were economy, largely. Immigration and abortion, or no, bureaucracy, immigration.
But the
abortion.
first debate touched on like the one between,
that's right.
Economy was
honestly, economy was pretty woven into both of those in one way or another, especially when it came to how immigration would affect the economy, or I guess the ousting of undocumented immigrants would affect the economy. I think, and again, I don't mean to reiterate, but I think that most developed nations, nearly all of them, were like very, very hard hit by COVID. Oh, every single one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, yes, like we were still in a rebuilding phase throughout the entirety of Joe Biden's presidency. But I mean, the numbers do speak for themselves. Like the economy did rebound better than like comparable nations did, under Joe Biden's presidency. That being said, I mean, I understand people always vote with their wallet. Like, it doesn't. People don't want to hear, why I made the economy, not as strong as it could have been. All they care about is the fact that the economy is not as strong as it can be.
Right.
And that made for a very challenging terrain in terms of like immigration. I think I'm hesitant to fold that into the other culture war issues, which I think were also another big determinant of this election. Because I don't think immigration is necessarily part of the culture war, although I guess like you could argue that it might be, since some people view it as changing a cultural makeup in the country. I think that issue is, certainly worth talking about, and I think a lot of Democrats toward the election got on board with the fact that something needs to be done to curtail illegal immigration. Like we saw, Mark Kelly supporting bills to further fund, the border because he is the senator of a border state, and I think that's like a large reason why he was considered to be vice president or the vice presidential candidate for the Harris campaign. But that too, I think, is a little bit over exaggerated in terms of the threat that Donald Trump was casting illegal immigrants to be to the country. It was inextricably connected to crime, and that crime was increasing because illegal immigrants were coming over. And I think that is a fear-mongering tactic. Because, again, the overwhelming majority of illegal immigrants do not commit crime. I think it's taking certain cases where people who those people should certainly be reprimanded in the strongest way possible, and they should be return to their original country if they're caught committing a crime like murder. But I think those
like
are
murder
exceptions.
or any crime.
Murder. Well, if they are caught committing,
obviously
a crime.
they'd be caught to be
Murder being in a very extreme case.
Okay, so it's okay. So I want to clarify your position. So it's not just murder.
Yeah.
You'd say any crime. We're kind of back in our debate mode.
So
here,
I get it. I mean, there have been cases where I suppose like an undocumented immigrant is pulled over for speeding, and because they don't have documentation, they then get deported. Like that's happened.
Right.
And I mean, obviously that is a little bit more of a gray area for me than someone who straight up commits murder. Like I think that's a little bit more it deserves more condemnation than going over the speed limit 10 miles an hour. But I think my general point is that those circumstances are exceptions to a more general experience for undocumented immigrants.
Right.
And I think it was very, very catchy for the Trump campaign back in 2024 to really hone in on that, because people en masse like find it to be a threat, like, and I think the election showed that.
Yeah, well, I guess at the risk of reiterating what we discussed in our debate, I guess I'll echo that same disclaimer that you put out a second ago. I guess all I would say to that is, we know Trump speaks in hyperbole. We know that when he speaks, in specific or of specifics, it typically isn't reflective of the actual specific, actual, actual truth there, if you will.
I mean, I don't even know if he speaks in hyperbole anymore.
I think he does. I like, especially like when he's talking about specifics, right? Whenever he starts speaking of specifics, like the crime rate is X relative to whatever else, I think what one has to look at is the essence of what he's saying. And the essence of what he's saying is illegal immigration is bad for communities. Illegal immigration adds to crime in communities. And even if it's just one more crime, it's of someone who shouldn't have been here in the first place. Like it's a crime done by a criminal. And it's almost analogous, not exactly the same thing, but analogous to if, let's say, a criminal who's let out on bond, whatever, like commits another crime on top of that. It's that same sort of thing because again, all these illegal immigrants are by definition already people who are in violation of the law. But we're not going to rehash it right now.
Yeah. I mean,
but
I think
quick response.
I don't again want to rehash it, but I think it's still an important topic of conversation because that was the thinking behind his attempt to undo the 14th Amendment, which.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Even Republicans would agree that is like a very far overreach of power.
I think if his intent is to actually reinterpret the 14th Amendment through executive order, and like that is it, period. That's obviously you can't do that, right? I mean, Joe Biden kind of tried to do this in this last couple of days of his presidency with the Equal Rights Amendment. He kind of tried to do the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you could view that, if anything, as a more symbolic course of action, whereas like Trump.
Biden said that the Equal Rights Amendment is not a law of the land, which is like ridiculous, Yeah.
But
my point, yes, of course that's true. My point is that I think Trump in doing that and a lot of other things too, not everything, but a lot of other things, he's trying to, I think, instigate court processes that would bring such a question before, let's say, the Supreme Court. Right?
Why? Because the Supreme Court would summarily reject the idea that the 14th Amendment doesn't grant citizenship to children of illegal immigrants.
I think I'll agree with you in that I think that the court would not support it. But I do think that there's more of an argument than it initially seems.
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, historically, if you're, I guess, if you want to look at the original reason for the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, it wasn't to let anchor babies happen.
Exactly. I mean, I guess there's a point there, but if you're a textualist, then it's pretty clear that applies to the children of undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess if you I suppose if you're a textualist and you're going by the letter of the law, I think the argument's a lot harder. But if you're more of an originalist, right, looking at how that text was originally understood, it clearly and obviously was not meant. This is like I think my same argument for like the whole sort of thing that is tried to be used to justify like Roe v. Wade, for example, with the whole like due process, right to privacy. We're kind of like reading into it a little bit with the 14th Amendment again. I think the same sort of thing where it's read into it, and I do think that there is somewhat of a legal argument, at least some of a legal argument to support what Trump's saying there. But
I don't mean to tie this into like a totally unrelated topic, but I think it is somewhat.
We're just going wherever we're going today.
If you're an originalist, and you take the 14th Amendment to mean that only at the time it was for, I think it was the children of slaves, right, or freed slaves. That was the reason that passed, or am I getting my historical like context like totally wrong?
Yeah, we're in the right ballpark. I don't want to confirm it.
It certainly wasn't to grant.
It wasn't for anchor babies.
Right, that's right.
I think we can confidently say that.
And so if you're saying that the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to anchor babies because that's not what the original writers of the 14th Amendment intended for, then you would have to be consistent and apply that to the Second Amendment, say that the original writers of the Second Amendment were not envisioning automatic
I think
weaponry.
And I'm speaking right off the cuff right now, but I think the difference there is a difference of principle, right? I would argue that the Second Amendment, yes, had the whole militia element to it too, but there's a certain, I think, maybe you could even tie like the whole natural law into this whole idea of like self-defense, generally speaking, that one has the right to defend themselves. And I mean, yes, while the framers of the Constitution, I don't think could have envisioned like modern weaponry the way we have it today, I think they did anticipate that weaponry would advance, right? And I don't think that and there are of course exceptions. We can talk about this for a long time, but generally speaking, I don't think that the modern interpretation of the right to bear arms violates the general principle that animated the Second Amendment. I would say that the modern phenomenon of having anchor babies, I think that does, and at least there's an argument to say that it violates the spirit of the Reconstruction Amendments, broadly speaking. But if I can put a pin in this one, so we can move it along here.
I mean, if I could say one more thing about it, just like
then we can move on.
Like Trump's administration, the courts right now. I personally don't really know why he would want a case that he would presumably lose to go up to the Supreme Court. I mean, the most uncharitable reason for that would be, I guess, uncharitable. Hypothesis for that would be that he would want the Supreme Court to rule against him, so he could, not adhere to their decision.
I don't think that doesn't seem reasonable. It could also just be that he wants.
A lot of his members, a lot of his administration have already shown a lot of some contempt for judicial conduct and
interbranch.
I'm seeing some seeds
jockeying
planted right now. Yeah, but not in this way. Not in the sense that judges should be impeached, and not in the sense that Amy Coney Barrett is Have you seen that today?
Today I've been unplugged today. What happened today?
I think
give my live reaction.
Right. Yeah. Amy Coney Barrett, or Justice Barrett, and Justice Roberts joined the liberal majority of the Supreme Court in ruling that President Trump cannot freeze foreign aid.
Was that yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Okay.
But today, I've just countless articles covering how I guess the MAGA movement has really just started to turn their backs on Amy Coney Barrett.
What does that even mean in the context of her having a lifetime appointment?
Nothing. But I'm just saying they're members of his administration have also come out against the decision and said that it's that coupled.
That's not unusual for.
Yeah, I guess so. But I'm just saying that coupled with other rhetoric about potentially, overpowering the justice system and the judicial system, I think it should be a cause for alarm.
I suppose I'm not as alarmed as you are, just because I don't think that necessarily, potentially, but not definitely not necessarily, that having tension between the branches is a bad thing.
Okay.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if you have
it's a good thing.
Not necessarily a good thing per se.
Well, it's a good thing for checks and balances.
Perhaps.
But not in this.
I would just say I think especially when we're in this moment in our country where we're grappling with very, 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 very important issues. I think we're out of the era of, and this is kind of referring to my first article this semester about ambition, political ambition returning with this administration, this era in politics. I do think we're entering a new era with the second Trump administration of American politics. I think we're out of the era. This is my point.
I would agree.
Of just we talk the talk, but what we actually do in government is just adjusting, costing, and spending in taxation a little bit, not really doing anything big. I think that era is over. I will reiterate my one concern and my one wish. However, I think the situation doesn't really lend my wish to coming true. But my one wish is that, or I guess my concern first and then the wish. The concern is that a lot of things are being done solely by the executive. And there's a great incentive to do that because Congress is so deadlocked, and Congress isn't, the Republicans in the House, for example, don't have basically any flexibility. I think that was a concern of losing Elise Stefanik for the UN, because that's one more seat that's gone, at least for now, and the majority is razor thin. The point being, my wish is that a lot of the big things Trump wants to pursue, I wish that it was backed up by legislation.
You sound like you don't like the expansion of executive power that's happening.
It's not that I don't like it per se. It's just that it's a shame that a lot of what Trump's doing has its legitimacy challenged in the way it is. I think.
Oh, you want it to be more
It would be nice if a lot of the EOs Trump is citing could be bills.
Right. If you want to solidify that,
It would make it more solid too, because of course, like in theory, in January 20th, 2029. Wow, I can't believe that's actually going to be a year and 4 years. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But President, I don't know, like Newsom or Shapiro or whatever, or Pritzker, who knows?
Yeah. Or Vance, who knows?
Or no, on the Democrat side, I'm saying a Democrat could come in. And, then undo all that stuff. But one thing I want to make sure we get to in this episode, I'm not even sure how long we've been going here.
I don't know either.
But we should look at the time before we started.
Say anything over there?
It doesn't say anything,
right.
but we'll just kind of intuit it.
Sure.
But I want to kind of zoom out, because so many people have been zooming in, talking about all the little things Trump's been doing and not doing and all that stuff. I just want to zoom out and just kind of look at, where do you think the party, or where do you hope the party, your party, is going in these years out of power, and just beyond? Like, let's just say, like, in these years, it's at least 4 years out of power, and then just where do you think the party ought to go into the 2030s in terms of, should it move more to the left, or should it kind of moderate a bit and move back to the right to gain back some voters? What do you think?
Right. I mean, I'll give like my assessment of what's happening, which isn't probably anything new to anybody listening. I think, there is great tension right now in the Democratic Party as to how their policies and their identity should proceed. I mean, perfectly exemplified, I think, 2 days ago with, I guess, Congressman Al Green's eruption during the joint session of Congress. And then, I guess, and you have like Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who gave a much more tempered address, sort of like a counter statement. I don't want to say I don't know, what's it called?
The response?
The response, the Democratic response to it's not the State of the Union, the joint session of Congress. And then you have other members. You have Governor Newsom, who sat in on a podcast with
Charlie Kirk. I was going to ask you,
and who was sort of, I think he was. He said something about like.
He said that I could be wrong, but along the lines of, he doesn't think that men or transgender women.
He said a pretty.
should.
I mean, honestly, something that I think like most Americans agree with, that transgender people should not be.
But he's kind of moderating there, right? Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. He wouldn't have said that.
He wouldn't exactly.
So you have people who are ranging from, let's confront Donald Trump by moving. I don't know if Al Green was necessarily moving further to the left, but by being disruptive, and then Democrats who are trying to become, more competitive by, sort of adopting some of the stances of the Republican Party. And I think right now, frankly, it's still too early to tell. But one thing that I can definitely say is that I think with this new era of politics ushered in by Trump's second term, is it calls for leaders who don't speak as if they've been training their whole entire life to be a politician.
Right.
And I think people used to really like that. I think, certainly up until 2016 probably was a pivotal point. People kind of wanted to look at a politician and be like, oh, this person knows how to speak, knows how to dress, like he knows how to, be a politician, and that makes me feel comfortable. And then Donald Trump comes along and pretty much challenges every aspect of that. He speaks very plainly. His suits are a little bit big. Like, he's not.
I will say, for all the money he has,
he's got to get a tailor. Like, I don't know what he's doing. His ties are always too long. Like, anyway, I think someone who has very good substance and policy, but able to communicate that in a way that isn't, hey, look at me, like I was the best student in my class, like whatever. Like I think a less filtered version of leadership is something that people are going to be looking for. I think it's what the Democrats should look for.
You think it's a good
I think
thing or
Jon
a bad
Stewart
thing?
should run for president in 2028.
Okay.
And I've been on that wave, since like the beginning of college.
But do you think that, I mean, it's really populism. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think right now? Are you saying, are you just like identifying it like descriptively? Or are you saying that prescriptively?
Now I'm segueing to more of a recommendation.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I think the populist wave is not going to go away after.
I guess to
Trump's
rephrase the
second
question,
term.
I framed it wrong. Do you think that, like, yes, of course, politically speaking, I think it's kind of becoming more obvious, as you were saying.
Yeah.
That's the thing to do. But do you think that on balance, that's a good thing for our politics?
Oh, do I think that it's good?
That's the question.
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good, because even if it results in the sort of policy that I want, let's say all the practices right now that are being practiced by Donald Trump are then practiced by someone like him on the left, and then I get some policies, probably economic policies, that I want to pass. That is not going to happen unless there's way more contention in Congress, in just like the general public. I think it's bad because populism is necessarily a game of finger pointing. I think. I mean, it requires you to get people who feel like they have been unfairly treated, and then point to an entity, a person, whether that's someone who is from extreme wealth or privilege or something, and it necessitates that they take them down, and I think there are productive ways to do that. I don't think it's productive. I guess the brand of populism right now is one that lacks a lot of civility, and I think that's overall harmful because interactions like this are rare. We're
Right.
You and I would be able to talk even though we disagree on the vast majority of stuff.
Right.
I think, and I mean, I think it's becoming more rare to televise that sort of interaction. I don't know how much rarer it's becoming in private interactions, and I think that might be overblown. I think people are still able to talk even though they disagree, but it's catchy when people disagree and they do so in a very hostile way, and I think that's where we're headed right now under the current brand of populism. I don't necessarily enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously my party's in power now.
Yeah.
So, but I will say it's a very weird dynamic because it is a lot easier to be in the opposition because, I mean, I think this principle is most exemplified in a parliamentary system, right? Because whenever they have prime minister's questions, you have everyone in the opposition just saying they could say whatever they want, and basically, or any little problem, they can say anything that they want about it,
Right.
Because they're not the ones in power. And then when that's flipped, it's certainly a little strange, right? Because you certainly become, you certainly have the urge to be, very apologetic, right? And I tried to catch myself. Obviously, I'm gonna genuinely support what's being done. That's the reason why I'm on the right? But I think at least I think I've been doing a good job of it, at least to a certain degree, of being able to call out what I think could be done better. If you listen to the last podcast that came out about Adam with Green Lantern presidency, I think a bit of that came out.
I did see it.
But
things are moving too quickly.
Yeah. And again, it shouldn't be overblown, right? I'm not jumping ship, but I think one way you can show care and love for your side is by calling it out when you think that certain things could be done better. Back to the question, though, my big question in my brain is what happens in 2028, right? And this is why I thought that J.D. Vance was an excellent pick. And even though a lot of people were like, oh, J.D. Vance, why? And people didn't get it when he was chosen back in July. I thought it was a great pick because what Trump was doing was being kingmaker. He was obviously
Not
choosing.
necessarily. I don't really think so.
Really?
Well, I mean, I don't think.
What other impetus would he have?
I don't think Donald Trump
president?
loves J.D. Vance. I think he was a wise political choice for vice president for Donald Trump. But
for electoral purposes.
I don't think. Yes.
How? I'm curious. He's in
Vance,
Ohio.
J.D. Vance is a very good foil to Donald Trump. He's, first of all, way more well-spoken.
Yeah.
His background is way different. He grew up in Appalachia, was in the military. He was, I suppose he was, a lawyer, if that counts for anything. But overall, I think he is, he's able to resonate with people, certainly in the Midwest, in a way that Trump, perhaps did in terms of getting their vote, but less so on a personal level. I think
But why do you think he doesn't like J.D. Vance?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this
is that more just like an inkling you have, or
this might be reading a little bit too much into it, but
Okay.
Trump was asked whether he thinks that J.D. Vance could be
Oh
a
yes,
good president next. And Trump said, "Well, I'm not going to say that." But I know, I understand.
Okay.
Trump needs to not disrupt or ruffle any feathers for the people that
Marco Rubio's still there, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I do see maybe some signs that Trump sees him as a future successor, like including him in, you know, I feel like he has given J.D. Vance a bigger platform as vice president.
Even going to the border. Yeah, was it the border they went to yesterday?
Yes, he went. Yeah. That was yesterday.
Yeah. At time of recording, of course. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, previous vice presidents have visited the EU and addressed them.
But you're right. It seems as if he's getting a lot of, even sitting in the Zelensky meeting, which probably won't have time to get to. But even the fact that he was there, I think, and felt comfortable to take up a role. He didn't ask Trump whether he could do what he did, but like it was quite obvious that he felt comfortable doing it. Right.
Right. I will say, I mean, I don't know, and I err on the side of Trump not being super crazy about J.D. Vance to be his successor, just my intuition. But if J.D. Vance were to be the nominee in 2028, I think that would be that should not be taken lightly by the Democrats. I think he's likely to be he's likely to be a pretty successful candidate. He is. I almost see him as Donald Trump, but like more dangerous because I think he's a little bit more methodical and effective.
Yes.
I also think he's a little bit. He's certainly less stubborn in my opinion, and he does come off as a bit more politically opportunist than Donald Trump. Like,
is that because of the
J.D. Vance?
Is that because of the switch he did a couple years ago?
Yes, like 80% because of that.
Yeah, I read that differently.
You think so?
I think it's easy to think of the Trump era, including Biden in the middle of it, right? The Biden interlude in the Trump era, right, as happening very quickly. But it's 2025 now. Trump announced as of this June a decade ago. Like a decade's a long time. And like I know it feels so short, but I mean a decade's the same amount of time between 1990 and 2000. I think we know this, but just like to put it in those terms, or 1940 and 1950, right? Like a lot happened in between 1940 and 1950, as we of course know if you have a basic knowledge of history, right? But I think if you apply that to J.D. Vance, I think for one's political stance or perspective on a person like Trump to change over a decade, I think is totally reasonable, especially given that in the beginning, many people on the right were like Mitt Romney, kind of like the old right, and then it was seeing Trump rise that started making a lot of people question themselves, and then eventually go along with his general program. It happened to a lot of people, and I think J.D. Vance was one of them.
It didn't happen to Mitt Romney.
Well, a lot of people does mean that some people were not convinced, and Mitt Romney would be one of them.
Right. I mean, J.D. Vance is young. He's like what is he, 39?
39, I believe.
Yeah. I think he has the potential to be very appealing. I think he would probably have to temper his positions a little bit more to the left, honestly, if he were to be like the most attractive candidate possible. But like in any case, I'm talking sheerly personality right now. He has a lot of traits that I think could resonate with American people. So I think the Democrats would need to find someone who can resonate equally, hopefully better. Yeah. I can't I don't want to predict too early, but there are certainly people I think who are like young and have shown great leadership potential so far.
David Hogg.
Oh my gosh. David Hogg. I feel like,
for those who don't know, David Hogg's the current vice chair of the DNC.
That's right.
And he was one of the survivors of the Parkland school shooting in Florida.
Yeah.
And I'll say it, I think he's taken advantage of the situation to parlay it into a political career of sorts. I don't think it's done in good taste.
How old is he? He's like what, 24? I want to say 25 maybe.
He was 18 and the shooting happened in 2018. It's been 7 years, 24, 25.
Yeah, probably around there. I mean, even he, like as you said, how much can happen in 10 years? Maybe his entire outlook and approach will change as J.D. Vance has.
Maybe.
But among those who are of presidential age right now, I think I've always really liked Wes Moore. He's the governor of Maryland right now. Yeah. I think he has like a lot of really good leadership experience. I think he is like cognitively brilliant.
He kind of gives me Cory Booker energy though, but I haven't really looked into him at all.
Yeah, that's my senator. I mean, Cory Booker tried.
All these Obama wannabes. I mean, like, I'm sorry, it's just true.
That's not exactly true.
Cory
just because
Booker,
they're like black men doesn't mean that they're Obama wannabes.
Fair enough, but Cory Booker definitely was an Obama wannabe, even in his campaign style back in, what was it, 2020?
I think.
Again, I mean, fair enough, because I really haven't looked into Westmore. That was unfair. But,
right.
But definitely Cory Booker.
Cory Booker, yeah, I could see him try to emulate, but like
Hey, we're off topic.
it's a
Sorry,
winning,
go ahead.
it's a winning approach. I mean, even like Josh Shapiro, people said that he was mimicking Barack Obama's rhetoric and his like intonations. But I like Westmore a lot. I do think Gavin Newsom's going to try to run for president in 2028. We'll see how that works out.
I will say he's very not conniving person. I would say that too, but charismatic. I would say. I think he is.
He is.
For those who don't know him and just like sees him talk, I think
I would agree. He is a charismatic guy. I don't think he is my personal pick.
Oh, okay, I see.
Like, in terms of just like, gosh, I just wish we could have a candidate whose character was really strong and good.
Mr.
And
Smith, who went to Washington.
Yeah, I wish we could have Mr. Smith. And, that would be nice. Maybe that's a little bit hopeful nowadays, like in politics.
Yeah.
But
and I guess to kind of pull it back to the whole populism question, this is my more like long-term look at the GOP. And I guess kind of hopes and concerns kind of all wrapped into one. I like the idea of J.D. Vance to succeed Trump. My biggest concern with Trumpism, whatever that means, is that it's so wrapped up. Well, one, it's so wrapped up in the person of Trump.
Right. Cult of personality.
Right. It really is. That's populism, right? I mean, like we've seen this before.
It's
like,
so dangerous.
Belong, and I mean, I don't think it's dangerous in the way people like to think of it with Trump. I think it's. My concern, my biggest concern for it, as someone who's young and has a lot to look forward to in the future, is just like what happens in Trump. I mean, was he 70? He's old, okay? Like he's within 20 years he's dead. Okay, let's just be honest, right? Within 10 years, maybe like, there's a good chance, right?
Sound like a threat, Noah.
No. We're being realistic here, okay? I think he's gonna get to the 4 years, but
hey, he's never had a drink. He's never had a smoke.
True.
He's never done drugs. Who knows? Maybe he'll live to 160.
Maybe he'll pass Jimmy Carter.
Maybe he'll get that Social Security, whatever. Maybe he'll be. You know how he said in this?
Oh, the Social Security is
got like people who are like 180 years old. Maybe
he said one guy was 300 and something.
Maybe he'll make it.
Yeah. But like he won't be here forever. Either in spirit, in terms of like the political spirit, or in person, and I think the big opportunity that J.D. Vance has, as he's kind of like the presumptive, I think he's kind of the presumptive, person to go forward, at least for now, is he has opportunity. I think he has the ability to take all like the kind of like scattered Trumpism that's not exactly ideologically formed, and then form that, right, into a more coherent political program, political ideology, if you will. And I think that will do, I think if he does that well, that can set the GOP up for quite a while, especially if these 4 years are successful or even have a semblance of success.
Right.
What I really hope that J.D. Vance, I'm assuming it's J.D. Vance, but I guess really whoever does in this next era after Trump leaves the scene in 2029, which he will, just for the record, he's not getting the third term, guys.
Okay.
He's not going to get a
He
third.
says so.
He does. I don't think he wants it either. Anyway, what I hope to see is not only like the formation of an actual political program, as I just said, but also this is probably like the biggest long shot hope, a turning down of the populism. Anyone that talks to me knows that I'm not a populist. I'm not a populist. I am a traditional conservative guy. I like the more polished politician, honestly. I don't like when they're a polished politician who just says hot air and doesn't actually do anything. That's bad. But I like a polished politician who actually gets the job done, which I think J.D. Vance is definitely more of that. And I want to see a return to that. I want to see true conservative governance that's not liberal, not even classically liberal, just true. You laughed. Yeah. I'm not a classical liberal. Truly conservative government that brings back some more of the what's the word, like I'll say like the elitism to politics.
Okay.
I'll say the word. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And I'm not saying I'm against Trump. People shouldn't read into it too much. It's just that I personally have allied, if you will, in the big tent that politics tends to be with the two parties, with the populists, because I think obviously it's best for my political wishes as it stands now.
That's where the momentum is anyway.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Get something done.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not going to go and start my own third party to do nothing, you know. But I do hope over time that's what happens. I think that'll be a good strategy for the conservative movement going forward. But I'll give you last words since we've been probably going on for too long here.
I think, if anything, we can agree in like on the spirit of some of the things you're saying. And like you say elitism, but I think if we were to take a less charged word,
right? I'm being very
really
blunt. You're right.
Right. It would be like a return to some sort of decorum and like some sort of decorum and like just I guess responsibility and overall just toning down the temperature in a lot of ways of things that are happening right now. I don't know if that's exactly what you meant by elitism. Yeah. Like you want things to be a little bit more refined.
I was thinking more of an aristocracy, but
okay. Well, I think then
that's a whole different. That's
don't
a whole
agree
different.
As much, but
but you go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I think. Gosh, with all that we talked about today, I think we can acknowledge that, March 6th, 2025, the Democratic Party is certainly fragmented right now. But I do think that the Republican coalition is not the most strong. Right. It's not like they're bound together by any common idea. And we've already seen how there are certain policies where there's a lot of divergence. We saw the H-1B visa become a huge fiasco in the Republican Party. I think the cutting of, or I guess the demolition of agencies is soon to become a really big problem for the Republican Party, especially as some of these red state Congress people rely on the funding of these and assistance of these agencies to sustain their constituency. That's going to be another problem. And that's the reason that it's such a tremulous coalition in the Republican Party is because it's built around a guy. It's built around a person. And, you say that you're not a populist. I'm not a populist, certainly not in the sense of the Donald Trump brand of populism, because I think it's a bad idea to concentrate that much power in one guy who does say one thing one day and then the opposite the next day. I think it makes for a lot less of a stable system. And I would like to see, I'm an institutionalist. I like it when the institutions as a whole decide, because I think it's the best mode of checks and balances. I think they balance each other out. And I think right now, something that should be alarming people is the erosion of those institutions.
So, well, I guess I'll say, I said you get the last word.
No worries. There's no
no worries. But I guess I'll say really quickly that I think that Donald Trump coming onto the GOP scene, from a GOP perspective, I think was necessary to shake the GOP out of just being the Democrats 5 years removed in social policy, and then just like marginally less willing to do spending in taxation, right? I think he has allowed the GOP to, like, for example, everything I said about J.D. Vance forming Trump's ideas into a political program and being a true conservative, or making the GOP like a truly conservative party, at least to a certain degree. Of course, you have to win elections and have to make compromises, but all that would have been like totally, a dream before 2016, because the GOP was just, really it was a party of business. It was, it was Mitt Romney, it was John McCain, it was kind of sleepy, right? So I think, I would agree with you insofar as I don't think that it would be best for us to have a serious, maybe people might get mad at me for this on the right, but no, I think it's true. I don't think it'd be good for us just to have several Donald Trump-like figures into perpetuity. I don't think that's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But I do think that this moment is his, and I think that this is his era. I would say.
I can't disagree with that.
But it's his era. I think towards a generally unbalanced good end, or has a potential to be. Again, he's shaking the apple cart up and allowing the reforms that I hope to happen to the GOP to happen, Will they happen is a different question.
Hmm.
But anyway, Andrew,
Yeah.
it was great to have you on. This is probably a very
How long
long.
was this?
I don't know. Oh, okay. It's been
I will see.
longer. But
If you're listening, thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. That's great.
Wonderful.